There is a structure in Egypt that has puzzled engineers for 2 centuries. Not because we cannot describe it, we can describe it perfectly. 4 triangular faces, a square base, a flat, or in some cases slightly concave, top. Limestone casing stones fitted with tolerances that modern construction equipment would struggle to replicate. An interior that is mostly solid, with a small number of chambers and passages that seem, by any rational accounting, insufficient to justify the scale of the structure around them. We know what it looks like. We have never agreed on what it is. The official explanation is a tomb, a monument to a pharaoh, built by tens of thousands of workers over decades using copper tools, wooden sledges, and organizational genius. That explanation has always had problems, not fringe problems, engineering problems. The kind that show up when you ask a structural engineer to reverse engineer the construction, and they come back and tell you the math does not close. But that is not what this video is about. This video is about a different question, one that almost nobody has asked publicly, one that becomes harder to dismiss the longer you look at it. What if the pyramids are not buildings? What if they are what remains of something that was never built at all? Start with the shape. Every culture that has independently produced large ceremonial or funerary architecture has produced something different. The Greeks built temples, horizontal, colonnaded, human-scaled. The Romans built arches and domes. The Chinese built pagodas, tiered, wooden, vertical, but articulated. The Aztecs built step platforms. The Egyptians, and only the Egyptians in the ancient world, built smooth-sided, four-faced triangular masses with square bases pointing at precise cardinal directions, with a geometry so specific that the ratio of the perimeter to the height approximates 2 pi to within a fraction of a percent. That is not what you get when you are building a tomb. That is what you get when you are observing something that already exists and trying to describe it in the language of sacred architecture. Now, look at the base.
What did you find?
The Great Pyramid of Giza covers 13 acres. Its base is nearly perfectly square, with sides varying by less than 8 inches across 756 feet. The corners are oriented to true north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. In 2500 BC, with copper tools, no GPS, and no theodolite, a workforce that mainstream archaeology has never been able to fully account for, produced a base that modern surveyors describe as essentially perfect. And the base is concave. This is not widely known. The 4 sides of the Great Pyramid are not flat. They curve very slightly inward, an indentation visible only from the air, and only at certain times of day when the angle of light is right. The concavity is precise. It is not erosion. It is not damage. It is structural.
Are you certain?
Engineers who
confirm
have studied it
This changes everything.
believe it was intentional, but cannot agree on why a tomb would need concave faces. A stump has a concave top. The compressed and mineralized core of a cut or broken organic structure exposed to millions of years of weathering develops exactly this profile. The center compresses more slowly than the edges.
The alignment.
The result is a surface that curves inward.
It matches perfectly.
The oxygen question comes next, because it always comes next when you start thinking seriously about scale. Current atmospheric oxygen is 21%. In the Carboniferous period, 300 million years ago, it hit 35%. Dragonflies with 2-foot wingspans, millipedes 8 feet long, a metabolic abundance that our current atmosphere cannot support. That oxygen came from photosynthesis. The official explanation is vast swamp forests of lycopsids, tree-like plants reaching 150 feet, generating oxygen on an industrial scale across the entire planet. The math has never fully closed. A 35% oxygen atmosphere requires a photosynthetic output that 150-foot plants distributed across available land simply cannot produce by any model currently accepted. The numbers require either an implausibly dense global coverage or something else, something larger, something whose scale we have been unable to imagine because we have never seriously tried. Egypt sits at the northeastern corner of Africa. The Sahara, which surrounds the Nile corridor, is not simply a desert. It is a compressed, mineralized ancient landscape sitting on top of what geologists call a craton, one of the oldest and most stable sections of continental crust on the planet. The rock beneath the Sahara is not volcanic. It is not sedimentary in the conventional sense. It is dense, ancient, and in places extraordinarily uniform in a way that differential erosion models struggle to account for. The stumps of the largest organisms in Earth's history would be sitting in exactly this kind of landscape. Stable, ancient, mineralized over geological timescales so vast that the original biological material has been entirely replaced, atom by atom, by silica and calcium carbonate. Petrified wood, except not a log, a base, a root cluster, a compressed lower section of something that once extended, by some models, 60 miles into the atmosphere. Now look at the pyramids differently, not as architecture, as geology. The internal structure of the Great Pyramid is anomalous in a specific way. The chambers, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, are not distributed through the structure as you would expect if the structure were designed around them. They are clustered near the center, occupying a tiny fraction of the total volume, surrounded by millions of tons of limestone that serve no obvious architectural function. Volcanic plugs have internal voids, so do large mineralized organic structures. The voids form during the mineralization process as gases escape. As the original biological material decompresses and collapses inward at different rates, they are not designed, they are left over. The granite used in the King's Chamber was quarried at Aswan, 500 miles south. Mainstream archaeology has never produced a fully satisfying account of how 70-ton granite blocks were transported 500 miles and lifted into place inside a structure while it was being built. The Egyptians themselves left no records of the construction, no project documents, no workers' accounts, no engineering drawings. What they did leave are texts that describe the pyramids as existing before the pharaohs, as being older than the dynasties that claimed them, as belonging to an earlier time that even the ancient Egyptians understood only partially. The inventory stele, discovered in the 19th century and largely dismissed by mainstream Egyptology because it contradicts the accepted chronology, describes Khufu not as the builder of the Great Pyramid, but as its restorer, a pharaoh doing maintenance on something that was already there. That is not what you do with a tomb you built for yourself. The Nile Valley is not the only place on Earth where pyramidal forms appear without a clear civilizational context. Bosnia, the Visochika Hill, which researchers have been arguing about since 2005, shows geometric regularity, internal tunnels, and a basalt layer at the surface that some geologists describe as concrete-like in composition. The official position is that it is a natural hill.
The
The
altitude
counterposition
drops
is that
sharply
natural
here.
hills do not have flat
It's the
faces
perfect choke
oriented
point.
to cardinal directions. Neither side has fully won the argument. Sudan, the Nubian pyramids, which most people have never heard of, are steeper, more numerous, and in some respects more precisely constructed than the Egyptian ones. They sit in a landscape even more geologically ancient than the Giza Plateau. Mexico. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is built over a natural cave. Its base dimensions are, within a small margin, identical to those of the Great Pyramid of Giza. These two structures are separated by 7,000 miles and at least 1,000 years of conventional dating. They share a geometry that is either the most remarkable coincidence in architectural history or evidence that both cultures were looking at the same reference.
The evidence
A
points
natural
to
reference,
a definitive conclusion.
one that was there before either of them.
The data
The
indicates an
60-mile
organism
figure
size
comes
significantly larger
from
than previously
atmospheric
estimated.
pressure
The
modeling
atmospheric pressure model
applied to
supports
the
this calculation
question
perfectly.
of what organism, under what atmospheric conditions, could have produced the oxygen signature of the Carboniferous and left behind the geological anomalies we observe. It is not a number that appears in peer-reviewed literature. It cannot, because no peer-reviewed literature has asked the question. It circulates in the research community, a loose network of geologists, atmospheric scientists, and independent researchers who will not attach their names to it formally, because attaching your name to it formally ends
I have
careers.
examined all the evidence.
But the
and three
logic is
key
not
facts stand
complicated.
out.
If the
trajectory is
organism
impossible.
existed,
2.
if it photosynthesized, if it was distributed globally, and if what remains of it has been sitting in our national parks and sacred sites and geological survey maps for the entire duration of recorded human history, then the height implied by the structures we can currently measure. Devil's Tower at 8,000 feet, the Tepuis at 10,000 feet, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Great Pyramid, is not the height of the organism. It is the height of what survived compression, mineralization, and millions of years of erosion. The original was taller. 60 miles is a lower bound. What would it take to test this? The same technology used to find hidden chambers inside the pyramids, muon tomography, ground-penetrating radar, high-resolution internal scanning, could be applied to the base of the Great Pyramid in a matter of weeks. The cellular structure of mineralized biological material is microscopically distinct from cut limestone,
The evidence
from
within
natural
these
sedimentary
slides
rock, from
holds
any
the key
volcanic or
the
igneous
entire
formation.
mystery.
You would know, not in decades, in months. The Egyptian government controls access to the Giza Plateau. Scanning projects require approval, and approval requires a hypothesis. And the hypothesis required here is one that no institution with a relationship to maintain with Egyptian authorities, with peer-reviewed journals, with grant
The
funding
evidence we
bodies,
found
has
suggests
been
a
willing
deliberate
to
pattern.
formally propose.
Look at the data points
This is
here
not a
versus
conspiracy.
here.
Conspiracy
You see, it's
requires
about
coordination. This
The force
requires
that
only the same
resists
institutional inertia that has always governed what questions get asked and what questions get quietly labeled and placed on a placard next to a hiking trail. The placard at Giza says, Tomb of Khufu, 4th Dynasty, circa 2560 BC. The placard at Devil's Tower says, Volcanic Plug, Igneous Intrusion, 40.5 million years old. Both of them are standing in front of something that has been there since before the question was asked. Both of them are waiting for someone to ask a different question. The trees are gone. Whatever they were, whatever they held up into an atmosphere we no longer live in, they are gone. What remains is the base. Compressed, mineralized, ancient, beyond any scale, our recorded history can contextualize. We built temples on them. We called them sacred. We oriented our cities around them. We constructed entire theologies to explain why certain hills pointed at certain stars in certain seasons. We made them the centers of civilizations we still do not fully understand. Yeah, because something in us, some layer of cultural memory or biological inheritance, recognized that these structures were not ordinary geology. Something in the Egyptians knew that the thing rising from the desert plateau was not made by human hands. They just did not have a word for a stump 60 miles tall, so they did what humans do. They called it a god, and they built around it. And the stone still carries the structure, and we still come and photograph it and post it and walk away having never asked what we were actually looking at.